Welcome to the Veterinary Financial Podcast, where we discuss financial freedom and professional success. I'm Meredith Jones, a veterinarian and financial planner for vets.
And I'm David Azis. I'm also a financial planner for vets.
Our guest today is Travis Hornsby, founder and CEO of Student Loan Planner, also founder of SLP Wealth. Travis, welcome to the show.
It's great to be here. I'm a guy that just started it all by starting the pod about how veterinarians get screwed over with student loans. So, excited to chat with you guys about vets today. It's going to be fun.
And that's why we wanted to have you, because you're the OG student loan expert. It seems like this article that you wrote years ago helped kickstart this whole thing of like even why we're here today. So just wanted to ask you about that article, about things that have changed since then and things that might not have changed, and just get your overall thoughts on why and how vets are treated so horribly when it comes to student loans.
Basically, this article that I wrote, Vets Are Treated Horribly Under Student Loan Rules, it was a sort of call to action in the vet profession, because I got started doing this, and my first client ever that was a paying client was a veterinarian. She went to Penn Vet School, right? Penn Vet School, aka the most expensive program almost in the whole country, at least for vet med, right? It's super expensive. So when she told me, I've got 400,000 of student loans, my jaw hit the floor. I was like, what? 400,000? Like, holy cow, are you kidding me? So I used my student loan spreadsheet that I used with my then girlfriend, Christine, and now wife. And I was like, let's see if this applies to more than just physicians. With her, I had been modeling PSLF because she's a physician. She was working in an academic center. But then for my friend who's a veterinarian, like, I couldn't model that. Like, she wasn't going to go work at an academic center. And I was like, wait a second. So you make less money than a physician does. Your schooling is equally as hard, and it's almost like harder to get in than some med schools, right? And yet you have to pay longer on your student loans. That doesn't seem right. Like, you have the same amount of debt, you earn less money, but you're going to pay for longer just because you're not a physician. Anyways, I got into her specifics, and then she referred me to a couple of her friends that also had a lot of debt and were really worried about it. And I just really helped them be at peace with their loans through math, right? Which is how that spreadsheet was born. And one thing led to another. Basically, I wrote an article based off of that experience called Vets Are Treated Horribly. Vets Are Treated Horribly Under Student Loan Rules. And then I actually promoted it with $100 worth of Facebook ads. It reached like the entire veterinary profession for like $100 worth of Facebook ads. This was like when it was like Trump versus Hillary for like the first round, right? Mm-hmm. The election hadn't happened yet. And like Facebook ads was just like the Wild West. So you could do anything. Like, you could promote, hey, I've got snake oil and it cures cancer. And you could promote it for $100 on Facebook and it'd reach tons of people. So those were the days. And then it just reached so many people. It started a huge conversation, I think, in the veterinary industry at the time, because so many people were so frustrated with their student loans, and the vet like schools were essentially gaslighting people. They were just like saying like, oh, the debt's fine, don't worry about it, it's not a problem. And they'd raise the debt, like they raise rates like 7-8% every year with tuition. And I got some angry emails from like vet school administrators, even like at least one or two people reached out and they were like, don't expect any invitations to vet schools anytime soon.
Oh my.
So yeah, whatever you want to hear about it, I'm totally transparent here. I'll tell y'all, but it was quite an eye opener to see how protective the vet schools were of their revenue streams, and like how, really serious they were about not wanting too bright of a light shown on that.
Yeah, where's all that money going if they're increasing tuition by that much per year? And well, I don't know. I guess I could.
Well, it's really because they can. I think the way the vet schools justify it is, well, if we don't do this, we're going to lose faculty and staff to other institutions that are doing this, right? And raising their rates a lot and giving big raises to faculty and staff and setting up really cutting edge treatment centers and new buildings. I think that there's, less of a philanthropic interest in vet schools than there is med schools. I have not seen any of the, hey, like some rich dude that owns the NFL team in the whatever state, like just donated $500 million for a veterinary hospital, hot dog, right? Everybody's going to get their vet care for free. Like, that doesn't really happen in vet med like it does in human medicine places, right? And so I think that veterinarians just in general don't get the same attention level as they should as human doctors do. And I think that the veterinary profession doesn't have as much lobbyist weight as like the AMA does. And so I just frankly think that the AMA is more powerful. So they got a lot of like sweetheart deals carved out in the student loan rules, whereas the AVMA is not quite as powerful. and didn't get some of those same deals carved out. And so our job is just to look out for veterinarians as best we can and to acknowledge like that things aren't fair, but life isn't fair. And so how do you make the best of it? How do you get, the best, just for your financial future, for your family and for you, so that you don't have to worry anymore? So that's the whole point of it, right? Is helping veterinarians live their best lives, acknowledging that you guys are not treated fairly. But you know what? Hey, there's still ways that you can save a lot of money and get a lot of benefits too.
Yeah, that's one of the things I was wondering about, Travis, is just what was the range of responses that you got to the article? And so it sounds like there was quite a range. And it's interesting because it came out in 2016, which was the same year that the Fix the Debt Summit happened in VetMed. And also it's a year that student loans were being recognized as a really big pain point in the profession.
Yeah, well, I mean, the Fix the Debt Summit was well-intentioned, but I think that it was more of a let's check the box to show that we're doing something. Mm-hmm. Like when the whole point of the summit is just sort of like, let's make sure you're heard, let's listen, but then let's like go on back to our 7 and 8% every year annual increases. I wish that people were more honest and more transparent with how they're going to operate things, in the sense of if the reason you're increasing the tuition at this rate every year is because you know that the government will give unlimited student loans that people will pay back based on their income, say that. Be transparent and don't pretend that like people are easily going to pay this back. Because that's what people were saying, just a bunch of misinformation at the time. They were just saying things like, oh, you'll pay this back in no time, or, oh, we know it's expensive, don't worry about it. It was all just parrying and just punting and just trying to like redirect. And it didn't acknowledge anybody's pain, anybody's frustrations or feelings, right? It was all just sort of like, oh, just trust us.
And then they have the stones, the vet schools, to actually reach out to the graduating classes every year to ask for donations too, on top of it.
I mean, yeah. Well, I mean, what that shows you is like schools will do anything to be ranked, to have a good reputation amongst other schools comparatively. Administrators get rewarded based off of like who's the most comparatively prestigious vet school. And they ask for money because essentially like they probably have some sort of ranking factor that's like the percent of alumni that gets a higher rating in some algorithm that like gives them a higher rated vet school than another school, right? I'm assuming that's why they make sure they try to ask for it. It's quite amusing, right? That you're going to go ask for money when you asked for $400,000 from me. That requires some stones, as you said. So, but they're going to ask for it because that's what they get paid for. People respond to incentives and so do institutions. And that's what I learned early on was, wow, these vet schools really respond to incentives.
So because of all this, because of the discrepancy between how vets are treated with their student loans compared to the human medical profession or even, dentistry, or the list goes on, what are your main action items for vets? What should they do given this, difference? Should they be thinking about their student loans differently compared to other high debt professions? What do you think?
I do think that veterinarians just need to hopefully be happier that they're in their profession than in another profession that they could have done. You got into vet med knowing that you would be making less than a human doctor. So hopefully you're at peace with that and you remember the reasons why you decided to do that. Because if you compare yourself to human doctors, then that's a recipe for unhappiness, right? So hopefully you're happy doing the kind of patient work that you do. At least that part of things is okay. If that part of things is not okay, then we probably want to have a deeper conversation about life in general, about what you want to do career-wise, right? Because first of all, nobody's stuck as a veterinarian. If you ultimately wish that you could quit and become a bass guitarist in a rock band, you can do that with student loan rules, right? Sometimes David has a bass guitar or something like that behind him in his team meeting.
You insult me. I have 4 guitars, not
4
guitars.
Guitar.
I'm just kidding.
He's got 4 guitars. But I mean, the idea here is like if you really don't like the work of vet medicine, then you can do other things because you can pay based on your income and you can essentially pretend that the debt's a tax and not have to have that just destroy your life or destroy your alternatives. But if you enjoy the work and you want to stay as a veterinarian, well, then it's just like, how do you maximize the value of that labor in a way that you're happy with? So we've had some clients go on and do their own startups. We've had people go and start their own practices or buy one. Sometimes you're competing with private equity, which is a little bit scary, but it's totally doable. Some people will go and they'll set up new practices in certain higher income areas where, they've got a good business plan in place. Some folks want to work for big corporations though. Some people just want to have the flexibility to, okay, maybe I want to work 3 days a week and like make 60 to 80,000 a year working 3 days a week and have a great lifestyle the other days a week, right? What's key in my mind is whether you are I want stability and predictability and not a lot of work person, or I want to work a lot and make a lot of money and have lots of business owner tax breaks and strategies, or if you're somewhere in between that. I want folks to just be able to harness their full potential as veterinarians financially so that they have less stressed lives. So that's really the point of it all.
Yeah, when you say 3 days a week, I mean, there are some vets, especially if they're in emergency, they're working 3 days a week right now. And that's one of the things I wanted to bring up is the way that things have changed, since your article was written.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, now,
so much.
Yeah, now you can, if you're an ER vet, you could work 3 days a week and make over $200,000 a year, depending on where you work.
I'll never forget when I gave a presentation to the National Association of Zoo Veterinarians. And I had all these models prepared, but like Google search, I couldn't really tell. This was before we had a veterinary financial planning group, right? I didn't have anybody to ask. So I was just like, what does a zoo veterinarian make? And I Googled it, and like some of the responses were like, 150,000 or something. And so I used that in my models, and I went up to the talk and I put it in the spreadsheet and I said, here's a potential example. Imagine a zoo vet with, a board certified specialty that did residency makes 150,000 a year. And the whole audience started laughing at me. And then I remember one of our consultants at the time, Rob Urban, was on the stage with me, and he looked around in the audience. I was like, am I too high or too low? And they were all like, too high. Somebody was like, go lower. I felt like I was a comedian getting heckled, And then so Rob just read the room and he goes, all right, so pretend 2 zoo veterinarians are making 150K total and they're married to each other and they're each making 75. And then everybody started clapping, So that was my first realizing that, our veterinary salaries and specialist salaries are all over the place and they're always changing. The dynamics of the market are always changing. Because when I started doing this, vets were making 60 to 80K a year. That was like the associate veterinary pay range. And it was very much like way, way lower than it is now. And I think a lot of things happen. Like vet med is ultimately a consumer discretionary item, right? Nobody is forced to spend money on their animals besides the cost of putting them down or something like that, right? So, vet med is something that is labeled in that consumer discretionary, which is why big companies like Mars have bought up all the vet practices, because Mars is consumer discretionary, right? It's just a candy instead of veterinary services. I think that's why they think of it in the same category. And I think what happened is you had the pandemic happen. What happened? Everybody got a pet. Also, everybody got tons of discretionary income suddenly because they couldn't go spend it elsewhere. So I think that the market dynamics around everybody getting a puppy because everybody's depressed and everybody suddenly having a ton of money because of stimulus checks and all these things being sent to people and the stock market mooning up to the moon, right? And also labor shortages, right? Because veterinarians, like suddenly, like if they had a lot of money, maybe they're retiring. And so you have fewer people that are providing the veterinary services. So suddenly it was like a perfect storm. So veterinarians went from making 60 to 80 to like now, like 120, what, Meredith, 120 to 140 for like a lot of associate veterinarians?
It's more, yeah. The latest AVMA data is showing that the average income for veterinarians is sitting at $153,000.
Wow.
I have some GP veterinarians that I work with who make up to $200,000 a year.
Yeah. So the market dynamics totally changed. Now the question is this: the next time we have a big recession, what will happen to the profession, right? Because we know that human doctors, their compensation mostly relies primarily on Medicare reimbursement. Like Medicare, Medicaid reimbursement, which is one of the largest governmental programs in existence, right? It's that and Social Security are the two huge things. Actually, a fun fact, if you ever hear this joke before, if you've ever heard this joke before, the U.S. government is actually a health and retirement insurance company that happens to have a very large army. That's the old joke, is like if you look at what the government spends money on, like healthcare and Social Security are like 50% of the budget or something crazy. And then, oh yeah, we happen to spend like 8% of our spending on the military or something, or whatever it is, 20, I don't know. But that's where that stability of a physician's income comes from. Like physicians certainly got big raises during the pandemic, but they did not get that big of an increase in a percentage terms. Like we know what our physicians are making, and it's a lot more similar to like a linear kind of increase than it is with vets, which vets experience this like exponential increase, right? And so the problem is when you have an exponential increase, there could be, if there's economic weakness, the question is, well, how much more would the industry contract, or could it contract? And I guess, Meredith, aren't there some more vet schools that are opening up soon? Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, there are multiple vet schools that are in the accreditation process, and many of them are just in the early stages. I believe there are 13 more vet schools that are in the works right now.
Oh my gosh, 13. Holy cow. I didn't know it was 13. I thought it was a few. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, so let me tell you what's happened to every profession besides human medicine. The schools realize, oh, wow, there's this big pot of money that we can get and it's unlimited. And is there anything holding back the schools from creating these programs? Well, it's just accreditation requirements, right? And so in the case of human medical schools, those are restricted by the number of available residency slots, which is funded through Medicare, I believe. So like the government only says, hey, we've got X number of residency slots. So if a medical school got created, they could get all the student debt just fine. The problem is that they don't have any spots to match their students into residency. Then the medical school would collapse because nobody would want to go there because they wouldn't match into residency programs. So with vet med and other professions, you might not have that same restriction, right? There's not a required residency that you have to go to. And so that is a danger to the profession from a perspective of current professionals. In other words, these 13 new schools, they're going to open up. And if they accept a bunch of people and pump them out into the labor force, well, now the availability of supply of veterinarians is a lot larger. And now you've got more veterinarians with the same amount of overall aggregate consumer demand that was there previously. And so what that does is it puts downward pressure on incomes. So I'm not saying this to alarm people. I don't think it's going to be alarming. But what it has tended to do in other professions is whatever that nice high professional income is, the incomes tend to not increase exponentially. They tend to increase more like linearly. And so I guess that's what I would guess going forward would happen in the vet profession based off of the 8 years that I've been around it, financially speaking, is my guess is this big exponential increase would probably be stable. And like we would probably see more modest increases from here on out instead of the same type of like exponential increase we've experienced the past 8 years.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, based on everything that I've seen since I graduated in 2008, yeah, I would definitely agree with you. A couple years ago, there were certainly folks who would have argued that it was just going to continue to go up, 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 up. But you hear less of that now.
Well, it might go up, 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 like in a local sense. Like if you have a area that's becoming rapidly wealthy, it might go up, 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 up because you've got tons of people with lots of money moving to an area. If you can be the craft beer of your local veterinary hospitals, right, where people absolutely love you, like the front desk people are very kind and pleasant instead of being just miserable looking at the clock, right? One guy I interviewed on the SLP podcast a long time ago or a while back, he started his own practice and it was like, yeah, I comparison shopped and I looked around at other veterinary practices and like the waiting rooms smelled like urine. And the waiting rooms were nasty and like people were really unkind. The experience when you had to get bad news with a pet would be very, very harsh and not very empathetic, right? So he's like, I just focused on like empathy, beautiful like waiting areas. And it makes sense because I watched this like Netflix real estate show, and one of the quotes I love from it is like, nobody spends money when they're crying, basically, was the quote. And so in other words, even if somebody's going through a really hard time in their life, you want to try to put them in a positive, happy mindset of like, at least they get to be there for their pet. At least they get to be maybe in the room when you're getting some of the treatments done or something like that. So I don't know. That was his approach, was just going really deep with his humans and his patients and just lots of empathy. I don't know. I think there's a lot of opportunity at the local level, regardless of the economic environment for the profession overall.
You reminded me of a couple of things. The interview that I had at an emergency specialty hospital, that I was sitting in the lobby waiting for my interview, and the place smelled like a grooming parlor. So anybody listening to this podcast knows what a grooming parlor smells like, and it's not what you want to smell when you're sitting there waiting for your interview. In Florida, by the way, which is where Travis is from.
I'm not surprised. Yeah, and the heat too, right? With the AC that's set on 78 to save money, right?
Yeah. And then, yeah, as far as the craft beer, it's funny because there's at least one veterinary hospital out there that has a wine bar in the vet hospital for clients.
That makes total sense to me.
Yeah.
That makes total sense. This is consumer discretionary. It's not required life-saving money you have to spend, right? Yeah, it's a totally different type of business than like dental or human medical. It's just different.
It'll probably always be different in that sense. But one thing that at least I've noticed, and that a lot of the vets that I've worked with have verbally indicated to me, is that especially since COVID and continuing over time, newer generations do treat the animals more of as like, this is our kid. Like, this is so less on the consumer discretionary side of vet med and more of, we will do whatever it takes, treat this with the highest level of medicine possible for any given budget.
Well, it makes sense to me because we're all having fewer children and we're having children later. And so a lot of people that I know, right, you get married, a lot of times your first step is to get a pet together. That does have a lot of positive emotions surrounding it. I think the reason why everybody bought a pet during COVID, right, is because like so many of us were so depressed. We were so sad and looking for some sort of positive, real interaction that wasn't online, right? That spoke to our souls, right? Like, I think that's why everybody wanted the puppy, because it was just everybody wanted to feel happy again. The great news for the veterinary profession is you got like an amortized, what Meredith, I'm not an expert here, but 10, 13 year stream of cash flows starting in 2020 that you can count on, right? But what happens in 2030 when all these pandemic pets start dying off, right? I mean, got to be thinking about that.
Yeah, it's interesting because, David and I were literally talking about that.
We literally had that exact conversation of like, oh gosh, is 10 to 20 years from now, are we going to have 50% less pets because all the pandemic puppies died?
I would take the hard other side of that. The reason is the world's getting older, particularly the developed world. So the US is getting older and wealthier. And so older and wealthier people tend to live longer. And so they, have a lot of extra discretionary income that instead of having a lot of grandchildren to spend it on, because people have fewer children, they will have it to spend on something. And so they have got it to spend on their pets, right? So I would think that a lot of people would be spending it on that. And then my thought would be that people seem to be getting almost like more pets, and more like complicated pets with more health problems, I guess, because of all the, Meredith, you're the expert here, right? But all the different doodles and all the different, I don't know if those are unhealthy or healthy, but you know what I mean? Like
don't get us started on Frenchies.
Oh, no.
Come on.
Is there such a thing called a Burmese mountain dog or whatever? I feel like I'm in kind of like a higher income college town, and I feel like I discover a new breed that's like a horse every week. All of them are exotic, and all of them like could kill me by looking at me, and they all cost 10 grand. So I don't know.
I love Bernese mountain dogs. So.
There you go. Is it Bernese? I thought it's not Burmese, right?
Right. There's a cat breed called Burmese, and then there's the Bernese mountain dog. Yeah.
Yeah, they're beautiful dogs. I mean, I think I might want to drop 10 grand on one of them, honestly, but they're just, I mean, because the thing is like, if you have the money to spend, if something gives you lots of happiness, you look at it from the perspective of a human, like, would people spend a couple $1,000 a year to be happier? Most people would say definitely, right? If I could be happier for a couple $1,000, and if it's like you keep your beloved pet around another year, is that worth another couple $1,000 or a few $1,000s? To a lot of families, it totally is.
Yeah.
And you'd go into it, you'd sacrifice a lot just so you could keep your beloved pet around a little longer because of just the happiness that it brings you, I think that one thing that veterinarians could learn more of is treatment plan presentation. So like dentists spend a lot of time on this. Like they talk a lot about what are your values? What do you want to do? Like what would this compete with, if you've spent this money on this and not this other thing, So they spend a lot of time just being very personable and human and, accepting of no and they're able to get their revenues up a whole lot by just getting more comfortable having very direct conversations about finances with clients. And like being like, well, you could put this on a payment plan. We can help you finance this with our partner, blah, 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 right? And so he said something like, as dentists, our competition is not other dentists. It's F-150 truck payments and fancy, like, I don't know what another type of car would be, but, the Corvette payments or whatever it is, right? Because people spend the money. The question is what do they value? What do they spend it on that they value? And I hope that our veterinarians are kind of preparing their finances for a world that does not look like today. And what that world could look like depends a whole lot on just how the economy does and how many people buy pets and a lot of things that are outside of our control. So there are a lot of things that are inside our control that we can do to really help our finances.
Mm-hmm.
The last thing I'll say about, and then I think we'll want to wrap this up, is on the COVID puppies and kitties that were like, oh, what happens in 10 to 15 years? Is there less or more demand after that point? To go to your earlier point, Travis, of like take even the stance of, no, it will be even more demand, could be an argument of most people, after they get their first pet, if they've owned that pet for 10 to 20 years, once that pet unfortunately passes, what do? They probably get another pet. And so now we've got this whole generation of more pet owners that will probably forever be pet owners. So I think the demand will, like you said, probably be linear in increases in vet med, not exponential like we saw. But I don't think it's going to go down. To wrap this up, Travis, what is your best piece of advice for our vet listeners? What should they be doing with their finances?
Yeah, my best advice is take calculated risk. If you are at all are interested in starting a practice or partnering in one, it's a lot lower risk than you think it is. Reach out to a financial planner that helps with vets like you guys, talk through some of the pros and cons, talk through how solid their personal finances are, and really consider taking that risk. And then on the other side of things, a calculated risk could also be, I'm going to go approach my job about working 4 days a week instead of 5, and then saying I want to earn X amount and I want to work one fewer day a week. Or I want to work 3 days a week instead of 5. And maybe I'm a GP vet, but like maybe I'm getting paid not as much less as I thought I was going to get paid. Because maybe you can play with the hours a little bit instead of 8-hour days. Maybe you do 3 9-hour days and 3 9.5-hour days to get to 30 hours a week and keep full-time benefits or something. A lot of things are negotiable. And I think that vets don't realize how many things are negotiable. Maybe with the exception of if you're working at just, massive bureaucratic company or something, maybe they don't negotiate quite as much, but you never know unless you ask. And I think that I would just want veterinarians to feel empowered to take a smart risk, right? If your ask goes poorly, which it's very, very unlikely that it would, what would your backup plan be? If you have a really solid backup plan, then you should feel empowered to go out and ask for more of the kind of stuff that you want. And so hopefully that's what vets would do. I think that vets have more power now than they've ever had before, and I hope they use it.
Travis, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your expertise. What if you could get fiduciary veterinarian specific financial planning that's student loan aware that could change your life for a price much better than you ever dreamed possible? If that sounds good to you, go to slpwealth.com/vet for a free 15-minute intro call to see if we could be a good fit for you. Until next time, take care and continue your path to financial success. This podcast is for informational and educational purposes only and should not be considered individualized financial advice.
If a specific investment is mentioned, it should not be considered a recommendation or endorsement to buy or sell the investment.
All investments involve risk.
Past performance does not guarantee future results.
You are encouraged to seek the advice of a financial professional before implementing any investment strategies discussed.
Yay, compliance.